Back with us some MPs, James Bezan, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. In Toronto, Peggy Nash, the NDP industry critic who spent a lot of time in Ukraine for those elections. In Montreal, Mark Garneau is the Liberal Foreign Affairs critic. Now, before we get to Ukraine, fact check time, reality check time. Mr. Bezan, you said the Liberals might not have supported the 30-day non-combat mission. Mr. Garneau said they did in our segment before. This deals with Iraq. I will read you from the October 3rd speech by Justin Trudeau, when he said the Liberal Party supported a 30-day non-combat role on good faith and on which we were briefed. This time, he gave reasons. They did not support the extension, but they did support an initial mission, but then they did not support the current mission. So I just want to reality check that. Now, let me move to Ukraine. You heard the Prime Minister on how much trust he has in Mr. Putin and this agreement. Mr. Bezan, he seemed to allude to the fact that if conflict breaks out, Canada is open to sending lethal weapons and or training Ukrainians. Can you elaborate?
As the Prime Minister said, we're cautious on this situation, very concerned about how this plays out when, President Putin and the Russians have not honored any other agreement before, never mind the Minsk peace agreement from September, but all treaties that surround Ukraine and Russia relationships. So we are somewhat concerned, but at the same time, we have to be somewhat optimistic that maybe this time it works. The one thing that we're concerned about is that just over the last 24 hours, while the leaders were meeting to hammer out a peace accord, there was observation of Russian tanks and troops and armored personnel carriers and heavy artillery coming across the border still. So
right.
that speaks to the larger thing, is that will this actually hold? And as Minister Kenney said, and the Prime Minister, we are going to consider all our options. We have signed with the U.S. and the Ukrainians a joint commission on defense reform and cooperation, and we are going to start doing military police training, but we'll see how this plays out over the next few days.
So you'll do military police training.
We're going to lead the subcommittee on military policing.
Okay, and again, I spoke to Jason again. I'm just trying to get some more details. Your government is now open to sending lethal weapons to Ukrainians. We know that the U.S. is open to that. They're also open to training Ukrainian forces, military forces. Is Canada open to both of those?
But all the equipment that we've given so far, which is substantial, has been all non-lethal. It's been flat jackets, it's been boots and winter gear.
But I'm just wondering, does that change?
30,000. And although we haven't considered anything yet, definitely we want to make sure that President Putin understands that Ukraine and its friends, like Canada, will consider our options.
Okay. It seems they're not ruling out sending lethal weapons or training the military there. Peggy Nash, what's your view in light of the failed ceasefire in September, in light of the tenuous nature of this, if this doesn't hold, in light of real trust problems with Mr. Putin, would your party support sending lethal weapons to the Ukrainians and or training their military?
Well, first, Evan, I think that we will judge this agreement by whether it actually holds, not just by what has been agreed to here because of all the past broken commitments. But certainly our priority is to see anything that de-escalates the situation. More than 5,000 lives have been lost so far, so good for the French and the Germans trying to get an agreement here. I think that what we should be focusing on and our preference is increased sanctions. We still have not matched all of the sanctions that some other countries have engaged in. We'd like to see that. Certainly,
but to be fair, I'm going to put you a bit on the spot here. We're in an election season. You guys want to be the government, so everybody hopes for peace. But foreign policy isn't built on hope, and you know it, and I know it. And we've tried sanctions. There's been a failed ceasefire. And I've asked a fair question to the government. Are you considering sending lethal weapons? They say they're open to it. They haven't ruled it out. If the NDP was in government, given what's happening, would you consider and be open to sending lethal weapons to the Ukrainians to fight after over 5,000 people have already died?
Well, let me challenge you, Evan. Governments aren't just built on hope, but clearly the French and the Germans, who are much closer geographically to this situation, are hopeful that a peace agreement is not only achieved, which they have, but is actually fulfilled and enforced. And clearly anything that de-escalates, that saves lives, that respects the territorial integrity of Ukraine is what's needed here. And our strong goal here is not to escalate this situation. So I think the first step is to keep the pressure on and see if this agreement can be fulfilled. But we also strongly support Ukraine and support our commitment to their defense.
Okay, but I'm going to say you're not necessarily at this point even considering you would be open to that. Let me get Mr. Garneau. Mr. Garneau, and I appreciate everybody, and I don't think there's anybody that doesn't want some kind of agreement, although what this agreement is, there's lots of debate about. Where are the Liberal Party on this? Would you be open to, if you were in government, sending lethal weapons to support, training the Ukrainian military as the U.S. said they want to do? Would your party be open to that?
Well, there's a range of options. Training soldiers is one thing. Sending in equipment like drones, which do surveillance, or using satellite imagery for intelligence, is in that mix, but it's not lethal. Once you get into anti-tank Javelin missiles, you're getting into lethal, even though you may call it defensive weapons. At this point, we do not support this. We hope that diplomatic efforts and the sanctions will eventually do their job at this point.
Okay, I got about a minute here, and I want to quickly get this in because we're waiting for news in Egypt that Mohamed Fahmy, the Canadian journalist, is out on bail awaiting retrial, but we're not sure if he's actually been released as of this moment, but we know he will be at least released. There have been a lot of questions. Did the government do enough to secure his release? We know in the case of the Australian prisoner who was also imprisoned, Prime Minister Abbott there made 3 phone calls. I'll start with you, Mr. Garneau, and go down. Did our government do enough in your mind to secure the release of Mohamed Fahmy?
No, they haven't done enough because the Prime Minister did not pick up the phone and talk to his counterpart, President el-Sisi. He's being pressured to do it, but up until now, all he's done is written him a letter.
All right, Peggy Nash.
Well, we clearly needed our Prime Minister to intervene personally in this case. It's just outrageous that a journalist would be thrown in jail like this. A Canadian citizen kept all this time. Our leader has been very outspoken on the Fahmy case. That other countries have been more successful speaks to the greater engagement by their leaders, and our government should have and can still do more.
All right, Mr. Bezan, Stephen Harper made some comments that he had made contact. We know there's a letter written. Why didn't the Prime Minister pick up the phone like the Prime Minister of Australia do and put some pressure to get this Canadian home?
I think the Prime Minister has communicated and talked with the Egyptian authorities, with the President himself, and we also know that you know, Minister Baird.
So he has to. That would be news. I just want to make sure I get that. You're saying he talked to the Egyptian leader about this?
With authorities. You know, we know that Minister Baird has been, when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs, has been very engaged in this. Minister Nicholson is now taking over this file, and also we have a great ambassador in Cairo, and Troy Luciak, who's originally from Selkirk and was a former constituent of mine and was also in Ukraine, has been working on this file day and night to ensure that we can have Mr. Fahmy returned to Canada where he
I get it, but people are wondering why the Canadian is still in jail. He might get out on bail, not home, just on bail. That still means he's in Egypt.
And
by Saturday,
we're still working towards and having him returned.
Okay, but so let me just clarify. The Prime Minister, you're saying he spoke about it. Are you saying he wrote a letter, or they actually spoke? Because the family has said he's never spoken, and they want some clarity. You say he spoke about this to the Egyptians. Can you just clarify?
There's been communication, and I believe it's more than just one letter, as was alluded to. I believe that there's been other opportunities where there's been an exchange.
Okay, I'm just going to press it.
And I'm not going to disclose anything.
Okay, well, I only ask because you know the head of the Journalists for Freedom of Expression and the Fahmy family have said the Prime Minister didn't.
And I think
if he did communicate, let's know.
Yeah, but I also think that those weren't fair criticisms at all, because I believe that the Government of Canada, led by our Prime Minister, by our Foreign Affairs team, have done everything that they can do, and they will continue to do, to ensure that Mr. Fahmy is returned to Canada.
President El-Sisi may respond to a direct conversation from the Prime Minister of Canada. That hasn't taken place.
Okay, I think we might have had
that?
we had a little audio issue there. I apologize for that. James Bezan, Peggy Nash, Mark Garneau, doing double duty, all three of you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Evan.
Pleasure.
Coming up, the government hasn't decided how it's going to respond to the Supreme Court ruling on doctor-assisted death, but at least one Conservative MP wants the government to ignore the court's decision and use the notwithstanding clause, something that the Minister of Justice has called the atom bomb. Maurice Vellicott on why he thinks the government should do something different. Stay with us.